everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we're here to talk about episode 5 of Unnamed Memory. Based off of the reactions of people that I looked at talking online, to me it really seems like this week we're dealing with a much ado about nothing sort of situation, because Oscar obviously and very clearly made a tremendous mistake in the way that he behaved today, but there are a lot of people who are threatening to drop the show, or who are in general just outraged about this, and to me it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Let me explain why. Here's the thing. From the very beginning of this series, we have known that Oscar is a character who does not take no for an answer. He is obstinate, he is stubborn, and he is stuck in his own way, and if he wants something, he is going to go after it, and he is going to get it. And that can be taken in a good way or a bad way. So of course, when something happens where Oscar feels that someone else might be able to take something he wants, in this case Tinasha, from him, he is going to react irrationally, he is going to react passionately, and he is going to take immediate action, whether that is right or wrong. The next thing to consider, of course, is the reality that Oscar is a prince. As somebody in that kind of social status and power, of course he's not going to react like a normal person. He's going to react like a spoiled moron. Now, I don't mean that's okay or that I like that, but it's not a surprise that we see this happen. Because, I mean, every time we turn around, he's doing something someone has told him not to do. The very act of going to the tower in the first episode was something where Lazar was telling him, yo, we really shouldn't be doing this, my dude. Like, we need to leave. But Oscar never listens. Now, to be fair, he does actually face some consequences indirectly for what he does here. One, he ends up causing Tinasha PTSD. And some of you are going to be like, well, he doesn't care about Tinasha. That's a load of shit. Let me put that flat out there. That is hot garbage. We are not having that take here. Here's why. If he did not care about Tinasha, Tinasha would be 6 months pregnant by now, because clearly the castle has had access to the thing that he put on her wrist, and clearly he is strong enough when she doesn't have magic that he is able to overpower her. If he was that kind of scumbag, for reals, we wouldn't be hearing this story because there would never have been a story to be told. The problem with everything that's happening in this situation is that he genuinely cares about Tinasha. His emotions have gotten the better of him. They've made him act like a worse person than we see normally. And I mean, as I've said, dude is already incredibly stubborn to begin with, or we wouldn't have this story if that wasn't the case either. So it's definitely a case where that's gone down. Furthermore, he's violated her trust. How is she going to be able to be comfortable with him after he's done this to her? Because while I am defending him in so much as that, like, yo, I don't think anyone needs to leave the series unless you deal with personal PTSD of this form, in which case I 100% understand. But this, to me, personally at least, is not a deal breaker. This is a male character acting like an idiot. And the thing is, if this was a woman doing this, we'd all be giggling and thinking it was funny, which is kind of sick. But anyway, the other thing to think about is that in the fight after this sequence, because the two of them are not smart enough for whatever reason to take the bracelet off, Tinasha gets injured, and it's on Oscar's account. So yeah, there are definite consequences for what goes down here. Now that I've given him some shit and some defense, I'm going to actually explain to you why I understand where he is coming from. Everybody's lying to him. And this is ridiculous, and the show really needs to make up its mind on something. Is Oscar in charge of this kingdom, or is the king in charge of this kingdom? Because very many times when he is in the presence of his father, something I notice is that despite the father being there, the father is kind of just sort of derping on the throne and doing nothing, and it's Oscar calling all of the shots. It's Oscar making all of the decisions. Is it Oscar in charge, or is it the king in charge? Because if the king is in charge, then the king can assign essentially anyone he desires to be Oscar's partner and to have them do the fucking deed. That is how things worked in the Middle Ages. Marriages were not matters of love and emotion and connection. They were matters of political alignment and matters of family building, not in a emotional or connective sense, but rather in a war stance and in a lineage building stance to ensure that people would be able to continue their lines and their connections to their respective thrones. So, I mean, obviously the dad is trying to help him, but is also not really being forthcoming enough. Then we had the whole situation with Tinasha and the general that she kisses. My dudes, what were you thinking? Okay, I think it was him that initiated that, so I'm gonna give her a little slack, but still. Every level of that was stupid, and it's no wonder poor Oscar reacted the way he did. Like, yo, it's not even what you might have thought where Blondie comes up and tells him. He sees them in the window. Now, I do want to point something out from a writing and directing standpoint. The angle for that might have actually been a mistake, because I think there are probably some people who actually thought he could hear what they were saying, and maybe their reason for their annoyance at his reaction is that they were like, yo, didn't you hear what was going on? They were trying to help you. When from that height and that distance with the window closed, it's almost inconceivable that there's any chance he heard anything. He just saw them kissing, and yeah, it made him see red because he actually has feelings for her. And I mean, again, as I've said, if we were dealing with this in a real world context, the two of them wouldn't even be in contact 6 months later. The first time she told him no, their entire conversation and connection would have been dead. But we're not dealing with a real world context here. We're dealing with a fantasy series, so it is what it is. Another thing I wanted to point out as far as the writing and pacing of the show is that I noticed that once they come out of this disagreement and they are talking about the reality that she and the general were keeping information from Oscar, we don't actually hear her initially tell him that they were keeping this stuff from him. And that in and of itself isn't necessarily a big problem, but it highlights a larger problem with the overall structure and plot. A lot of you have kindly been coming and giving me information that the anime is lacking that is present in the manga or light novels, and I really appreciate that. But this example of something where we as viewers know that it happened and then we can see that it was missing is a great example of what's potentially going on with this show, and the fact that we are probably missing a lot of context. Another place I noticed this was actually with the whole situation with the blonde maid girl. I think her name is like Maris or something. I'm never gonna get her name right, guys. But the whole situation with her fighting and everything, and reflecting back on the character Vault, who is in one of the earlier episodes. Those two characters and their deaths, I mean, we do get the fact that she has some connection to the general, supposedly, but at the same time, like, we don't really understand anything about them, and they lived and died without, as far as a anime viewer perspective, actually serving any purpose, and that is so weird. Now, we did get a sequence of a flashback where we see Tinasha as Ati, or whatever her name was, and she's being carried by Hot But Evil, and that was pretty interesting because now we have absolute proof that the two of them not only knew each other in the past, but that they were obviously in some way close, which is not something I had fully suspected yet. I'd kind of guessed, but I had no proof, but now we do. So that's interesting, and obviously he did something to violate her trust, which makes the sequence with Oscar make even more sense, because obviously the flashback with Hot But Evil is intended to serve as a precursor to the potentiality of Oscar having broken Tinasha's trust with what he does later on in the episode. And obviously Oscar immediately apologized, Oscar felt remorse, etc. We'll have to see how he behaves going forward, but my money says that if something goes wrong with her and Hot But Evil, which is incredibly likely given that they are not together now, I'm pretty sure that he did not try to make amends and that things just went really messed up. On a visual standpoint, the fight sequence at the end of the episode was pretty darn cool. I thought that the fight between Oscar and the White Beast was pretty well done. I thought that he held his own quite well there, and it makes sense now that we saw the training that he did in last week's episode, and it's nice to actually see him using that and taking advantage of that, and it's nice to see the two of them fighting together rather than her fighting stuff while he's huddled in the corner, because if that's the kind of relationship they were going to have, then they aren't really equals in any way. And that's really a problem, because even if she's lived longer than him and stuff, if they don't both eventually bring something of value to the table for each other, then they're not going to be able to actually engage in a healthy relationship of any form. And that would actually be a real problem, because Oscar's outburst earlier and her secrets earlier were both definitely detriments to a good relationship, but they're things that can be worked through. If one of them just simply did not bring anything of worth to the relationship, that could lead to resentments, fighting, lack of respect for each other, and a bunch of other things that would be a real mess. I also thought that Tinasha's spell, where she basically pocket dimensions somebody for a minute there, that was pretty cool. And what happened at the end, where the blonde girl essentially like has her soul flee her body, what the hell was that? And I am still curious about what that red orb is, and the fact that it's connected to Oscar's mom. It's interesting too there, because like we don't really know anything about Oscar's mom. We don't know why she's dead at the start of the show, whether she died naturally, whether there was some kind of curse, whether something else happened. Is it connected to the curses that the father and Oscar have? Did the Witch of Silence have some kind of connection to Oscar's mom in some way? And was she either outraged at the woman's death, or was she potentially the cause of it? Who knows? Wrapping things up on a lighter and more fun note, I really thought it was cute seeing the little red dragon sipping Tinasha's tea when she was speaking with people. That was just absolutely precious, and it just seemed like something my dogs would do, because they'll do that with like a cup of coffee or something if we're not careful. And I just really loved that. It was just like a little scene, a minor thing, but it was such a nice touch. And despite the fact that the dragon is obviously a fantastic creature, it did a beautiful job in humanizing it and making us feel a fondness and connection for it, which could be something that'll pay off later on in the story. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, those are all my thoughts on this week's episode. I'd love to know what you guys thought. Are you mad at Oscar? Are you mad at Tinasha? Do you just want them to make up? Let me know down below, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye!